As a former journalist, I've grown fascinated with people's stories. Stories about where they're from and how they came to be. But the stories that intrigue me the most are the ones about a time that changed the entire trajectory of their life's course. Stories of that moment. Join me, your host, Chida Rebecca, as I explore these stories with friends, both old and new. Hey everyone, I'm Chida Rebecca, your host of That Moment, and I'm super excited because I am joined by my really good friend Brandon Johnson, who's going to share a little bit about his story today. Hey Brandon.
Hi.
Good to have you.
Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
Of course. You were like one of the first people I thought about when, putting this together. So yeah, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, that's special. Thank you.
Cool. Well, so I've known you, we were just doing the math. It's been about 13 years now.
Yes.
Yeah, seems like yesterday.
Right around 2010.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So I want to say shortly after we met, and I'll let you tell that story, but just following your journey, I became super intrigued with the course of your life and how you just really overcome a lot of significant moments. And they've really been inspiring to me too. So I have to tell you that. But I want you to just start off by telling our guests who you are and a little bit about you.
So like you said, my name is Brandon S. Johnson. I added the S in there because Brandon Johnson is a pretty common name when I Googled it, and I wanted to kind of stand out a little bit when you look for me. But I'm born and raised in San Diego, California. I decided to leave to go to college in Nashville, Tennessee. So I went out there 17. I was inspired. My mom had told me about it, and that's her alma mater, Fisk University. So I went out there. I did the college thing. I was contracted to be a second lieutenant in the Air Force, so that helped me with my college journey.
Yeah.
So I thought. And then in sophomore year, I found out my mother passed away. I didn't even know she was sick. I mean, she had lupus, but she hid it from me. And her last few days in the hospital were during finals at school, and she told everyone not to tell me because she didn't want me to get unfocused. So I just got that phone call. And finals, so then the school year ended and I left. I didn't go back to Fisk University because I had a brother and sister here in California who were somewhat alone now. Their father wasn't around, he was in prison, and they were in their will left to my aunt, who had never had kids, never been married, and to get two preteens just dumped on your lap is a lot.
Yeah.
So I left school and said, I'll come help you take care of them. And I lived in LA for a little bit, and I tried to do the LA thing. I wanted to be an actor. I was being a poet. You're just trying to find your legs. I was still fairly young, had a mountain of debt from college, and I also owed the Air Force back all the money that they had given me up till then. But I didn't think. I was just kind of in grief and just left. I gave it all up. So that was fine for a little bit, and I got a job. I was hustling, taking care of my brother and sister, living with my aunt. Got a job working for the Apple store at the time. And I thought I was doing okay. Accumulated cars, debt, credit cards, was doing my own thing. And then one day I was trying to go to school at Santa Monica College and work at the same time. And I was late a little too many times. One day I clock in and it says, you're no longer an employee here. That was in around 2008, which was the last big recession financially. People were losing value on their homes. They couldn't get jobs, and neither could I. Very quickly, I lost everything. I couldn't pay my rent, couldn't pay my car note for very much longer. That was way too high. But after I couldn't pay my rent, I said, okay, let me spend a few nights in my car while I figure this thing out, until they repoed that after 3-4 months for not making payments. And life went downhill fast. Yeah. And I'm a hustler. I was applying every day. I was at the mall walking around with my resume. I was applying at McDonald's, The Gap, other Apple stores. Nobody was hiring because it was a big recession. Yeah. They wouldn't even call me back. And finally, I get a call from the LA County Fire Department. I had been in their system for a year trying to get this job. I said, finally, life is going to take off for me. Going to have a good job. Going to make something of myself. About a month in, I jump off the back of a fire truck and injure my knee, get a strained ligament, and I am injured out. I'm injured out of the academy. And at that point, I'm living in a hotel. I call my grandmother here in San Diego, and I say, can I come live with you while I figure this out? She said, come on, baby. I come down, and that's how I ended up back in San Diego. One day we were walking around Choyas Lake, and she knew I was a photographer trying to start my photography career, and she pointed out Dr. John Warren. She said, do you know him? I said, I don't. She said, well, he owns and runs the San Diego Voice and Viewpoint newspaper. She made me talk to him. We exchanged information. He said, all right, go see my daughter. Chida,
Yeah.
and we'll see if we have some work for you. And that's how we met.
It was so cool because we were in desperate need of a photographer. I had just moved back to San Diego to take over the business because my mom had passed the year before. And I remember getting your information and hadn't seen any of your work really, but I think since you out on assignment, you know, my dad was like, yes, this young man is a photographer. And I'm like, all right, cool. So I remember getting the pictures back and I'm like, oh, wait a minute. He's like a professional. Like he didn't say all this. I just remember you being really quiet and like humble about it. Like I just thought like, oh, this is a guy just trying to learn how to shoot or whatever. So I remember getting the stuff back and I remember doing some digging around like, wait a minute, this brother done shot before. And I saw what a great job you were doing. So you being at the newspaper was a real asset. I mean, you really brought a lot of life to the publication through your photos. So it was cool. I was like, all right, we got a good person on the team.
I argue my whole career in San Diego has taken off from my work with you and the Voice of Viewpoint.
Wow.
The majority of the events I've even run into with the AKAs, the Deltas, all the different sororities, all the different organizations in general have started the spider web of even what I get to do now with Dr. Lisa, and we'll talk about that later.
Yeah. So you got to do that, even though it may have kind of laid some foundations for you to meet some really cool people. We both know that was just a tough time in general because the paper too was coming out of a really bad space. You know, there were weeks I'd have to pass my check off to the staff because it wasn't popping like that. And so I know some of my staff, like the people that were journalists and doing contract work, would have to work other jobs and stuff too. So when did you decide you needed to do a little more to kind of push yourself? Even though we kept you busy, the reality is we live in an expensive city and sometimes you need more than one, you know, form of income to get things going. So what did you do in addition to working at the paper?
It's funny. I have this word tattooed on my arm. It's freedom, 1865. And it's the year of Nat Turner's revolt. And so freedom is one of the motivating factors for me. And I realized, even working with the Voice of Viewpoint, I still wasn't making very much money.
Yeah.
And I learned early on that poverty is a prison in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And yet I had really, really big, tangible goals and dreams that I could visualize but didn't know how to get there. I knew I wanted to travel the world. I knew I wanted a family. I said, I knew I want to experience things and taste things. I want to start businesses. I had all these things in my head, but I didn't really know how to get there. And so I got a job, right? I got a job, my first job after a while of searching, right? And I made $11.75 doing security downtown. Security is a fairly boring job, but here's what I realized. A few blocks over was the big central library. And so on my lunch breaks, I would go down there and I had two motivations. I would check out books on finances and financial literacy and personal finance. I started with the Dave Ramseys and the Susie Ormans and the Robert Kiyosaki's, and I said, I need to understand how money moves because I'm a smart guy, but I have no financial education, no knowledge. The other thing was I would get books on travel, usually solo travel, hearing about people's experiences. I had these screensavers that would go by on my computer every day. I said, okay, I got to figure out how you see these places in the world. And so those two things, I said, I've got to figure this piece out. So I was working for the Voice and Viewpoint. I was making $11.75, but I realized this isn't taking all of my time. I was fairly single, and I wasn't doing a lot. I didn't have a big social life. I was still new here. So I realized I had, honestly, 24 hours in a day. I was working 8. I was sleeping 8. And I decided to work about 80 to 100 hours a week. I worked my day job, and then I would get off, and I would work at a hostel for 20 hours a week in exchange for room and board, free pancakes in the morning. I worked at the Voice. I also did security at everywhere from the Hard Rock Hotel to all the bars downtown. I would do those on the weekends. So my entire life was taken up. I don't exaggerate when I said $80 an hour because I didn't have my degree.
Yeah.
I had a smart mind, but I didn't have much of a resume. All I had was time and effort, and I didn't eat out. So I just gave up a social life. I ate PB&Js or whatever my grandma will let me pack, and I said, I'm going to work nonstop and save as much as I can so that I can get some cushion between me and life. Yeah. And that is really it. And I say that's kind of the one thing that's different than me than most people. It's not much. I'm not much smarter. I just will accomplish.
Yeah.
I just like to execute. I'll find a way. And so I did that. I remember I saved up my first $20,000, right? Worked still at this $11 job.
Yeah.
And I thought, okay, wow, I had never had more than $1,000 at one time. So this was big money. But I said, okay, that's the first part of financial literacy. You need to have an emergency fund so you can take care of emergencies. But I realized I was still in massive debt, credit cards, student loans, the U.S. government. And I said, okay, well, I still don't feel free. So I realized what the next step was, and we can get there. But that is what I did.
Yeah.
I just took every job I could, and I outworked my lack of experience in the workforce.
I remember you doing that. I remember you having to turn down some assignments, and I was like, when are you sleeping? Like, when I finally got the gist of what you were doing, I was like, Brandon, you good? Like, and you were so driven with your goals. Like, you were like, I have goals. And I remember, even though I had always wanted to travel, I hadn't really tapped into it because I was running a newspaper. You know, at this point, I'm a single parent, like, you know, income's a little sketchy, you know, trying to rebound the business. But I really didn't think there was a room for me to do stuff like that. And I remember being inspired through your journey, your travel journey, and starting to ask you questions. And you were like, well, this is how you can do it. You can, you know, get these discount deals over here, and then you plan out like this. And I remember you being very intentional and like planning out a trip like a year away.
Mm-hmm.
And in my mind at the time, I'm like, that's so far away, you know, like, how could you be setting a date? Like, how do you know what you're going to be doing then? How are you going to be available? And it was really like, for me, observing that through you was really a mindset shift in how I thought about my future, because everything I did was so immediate. I felt like I didn't have time to think that far ahead. I didn't trust that whatever plans I set a year out were going to come to fruition for some reason. It was really weird. So you did inspire me in that way to want to like travel more and to think like, okay, yes, tomorrow's not promised. I don't know if I'm going to live to see tomorrow, but like be intentional about making time for yourself and exploring those things you want to explore. So thank you for that. You probably didn't know that, but just wanted to tell you that.
No.
So yeah. But I wanted to ask you, so you're going through all this, you save up your first $20,000. I've always known you to be a super creative, you know, with writing and different things like that. I think at the time you hadn't really like done a lot with it. I know you were working all these jobs and doing things, but I felt like there was a desire in you to kind of tap into writing more and exploring more of your creative side. So when did any of that start to surface and come into your, you know, your place as an author and stuff like that? How did that come about?
You said a good word, intentional, intentionality. I think that's the superpower, being intentional, being self-aware, and being able to take big ideas and reverse engineer them into bite-sized pieces, small steps. That's one thing I'm really good at. So we know I lost my mother. Well, then I meet my now wife. Well, we were having our first child, and then in the 8th month in the womb, we lose him. His name was August. I have 2 other children, Marley and Langston. So I name everybody after writers. Yeah. That's important in the story. Yeah. August Wilson, Bob Marley, Langston Hughes. And so we lost him, and we still weren't doing well financially. And I said, okay, loss was becoming a constant at this point. I lost all my grandmothers. My only parent or parental figure was my dad. Yeah. And I realized in order to honor their legacy, I've got to do something different. So I remember I had this dream to travel, and this leads to the book. Yeah. But I didn't understand how I was going to pay for it. I wanted to go around the world. And so I looked up a year out speaking, an around-the-world trip. It was going to be $2,500 in flights, of which I didn't have any. All my money was in the negatives. My checking accounts were in the negatives. Debt was in the collections, and I still had this repossession. I said, how am I going to make these dreams a reality? Didn't have money. What I did have was time, and I had the know-how that I was spending, or the knowledge that I was wasting, about $6 every single day eating out at Subway, chips and things like that. So I said, okay, I got this big idea, this trip. How can I reverse engineer that? So what I did was, for a little over a year, I stopped eating out, packed a lunch, had that same $6 transferred every day from checking to saving, and bought myself a trip around the world. I went from San Diego to Bali to Thailand to Egypt, Amsterdam, Iceland, Paris, New York, and back. And then I eventually came back and wrote a book about it. I wrote a book called August and the Wind, and it's about a boy named August who loses his mother to the sky and goes on a journey around the world, climbing the highest things he can find, looking for his mother. And he goes to all the places I've actually been to, and so we use those real stories. And so those experiences, I always say, kind of need to happen for this book to happen. And it's really touched a lot of lives. I only know because either people have told me or I've read the reviews.
Yeah.
And they're usually from more adults than children, which is also interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know how to write a book. I just wrote this story on receipts and napkins while I was doing security. I would just, oh, okay, that's the next part. And I would just stuff them in my pocket, and they sat there for a year or two.
Yeah.
Then I said, let me figure out how to take this and put it into something. So I did nothing more than went on Google and said, how do you write a book? And then I said, okay, let me understand the difference between traditional publishing and self-publishing.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized by going the traditional route, I would only be able to sell my manuscript, my words. They would then find another illustrator and put them together. And I said, well, that's not what I want. I want to make sure the kid is Black. I want to make sure the places that he went to are represented well. So I said, let me just do this myself.
Mm-hmm.
Still didn't know how. So I said, well, how do you self-publish a book? What are the moves? Amazon obviously has a program to self-publish. So I went on a website or a group on Facebook,
Mm-hmm.
asked a bunch of people if they would author my book, or illustrate for my book. And I sent people the idea of the book. One lady came back, Kasima Weidman. She lives in North Carolina. We've still never met to this day.
Wow.
She was so inspired by the story. She drew me a couple sketches. I used those sketches to create a Kickstarter, sold the book pre-order that still wasn't written, raised about $5,000 in pre-orders, and used that to finish the book, pay her for the rest of the illustrations. I joined the Young Children's Writers Book organization and had them show me how to write a book and say, that's too long. Kids don't say that. They need to understand this. And we just got it done, published it, and proud of it.
That's so cool. The book is great. I love the book. It was really, really good. That's awesome. So you got that goal accomplished, kind of checked that off, did the travel thing. There were some other moments in your life that were pretty pivotal because I get the sense that even though you had done those things and you were kind of seeing a light at the end of the tunnel, it wasn't enough. You've never been like a just enough person. I feel like you have these big goals and aspirations. You are determined to get there, and you're not going to take no for an answer. So it may be some rocky moments, but you're going to get there. So talk a little bit more about how you got to your next pivotal moment and what that was.
Well, one of my proudest and most recent pivotal moments was I was able to, for the first time in my life, I was able to quit my full-time job, 9-to-5 job. That was always a dream of mine.
Mm-hmm.
I've always wanted to work for myself.
Yeah.
I've been an entrepreneur in spirit since I was a kid, and I would win pizza coupons. One year I won a lifetime supply of pizza coupons. I said, and I sold them. I took them to school and sold them all for less than the price of pizza at school.
Yeah.
I said, they're selling them for $3. I got you for $2. And that was I love it.
Yeah.
But being an entrepreneur in spirit doesn't mean it's going to pop off right away.
Yeah.
And I won't say I'm risk averse. I'm willing to take risks, but I'm always calculated.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, I need my side business to grow because I got family, I got dreams before I can completely leave. And something happened. I was now the head of security at a high school. But I was still doing what I do now.
Yeah.
I teach education. I do financial literacy, and I'll mention that a little bit later. I work with young people. But the school I worked for doing security didn't know that. And so one day, they say, hey, we're looking at hiring a young African-American male to come speak to our students. Would you mind sitting in on that call and just let us know what you think?
Yeah.
Me being one of the few Black people working there, but then not knowing this is what I do outside.
Mm-hmm.
So I listened to this young man. He was great. He spoke well. And then at the end, we said, we're going to need you for 45 minutes and then a 15-minute Q&A. He said, all right, it'll be $5,000. Then we get off the phone, and I watched how everybody in the office said, all right, $5,000, boom, we'll get it done. We'll have a little bake sale. We'll make sure we get them out. I quit that year when I realized what I didn't know.
Yeah.
And I said, oh, okay. You can actually, I wasn't really aware of what schools and what businesses and organizations will pay for this. I had to see it. I had to hear it and be on the other side of the phone call. And I quit that year and said, oh, I can do this myself.
Yeah.
And that was one of the pivotal moments. And I honestly so taking that and then taking all these moments of living really on the brink of poverty, right outside of it, enough to feed myself, but wanting so much more for my life, I said, okay, if I can teach myself financial literacy, because now I've paid off all of my debt.
Yeah.
I'm debt-free. Net worth has grown significantly. I've gotten to experience some amazing things, and I now get to teach financial literacy. I said, okay, there's a lot of principles that our community and the majority of the world, from 5th grade all the way up to retirement, just don't know.
Yeah.
And it really excited me. Not the money piece, not the math behind it, but the idea that you could actually change the trajectory of your family tree and live the life that you dream of if you know a few things. That inspired me a lot. And I find myself just talking to friends, sharing, hey, you know, this is what a 401k does. You should really do this. Maybe you should do this with your investments. Let me talk to you about property and all these different things. And before you knew it, a business was born.
Mm-hmm.
And I created a company called BSJ Coaching. And I initially and still do work with individuals, couples, millennials. My bread and butter and my favorite demographic is still struggling. A lot of times I get to work with mothers, a mother of 3 who is one of my recent clients who thought her husband was going to have everything taken care of. So she didn't learn any of the business behind her money, and then they're not together anymore. They had a divorce.
Yeah.
So she calls me, she says, I'm struggling. All the retirement, all the pension things I thought I can count on, I don't have. I don't have anything saved for myself. I have these 3 kids. Can you help me?
Yeah.
That is the favorite person that I love to speak to. But my new passion and love is speaking to young people, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, who are right on that cusp of, especially those who come from, I get to speak to a lot of people from lower incomes or whose families still live across the border in Mexico, and they're usually the first English speaker in their family. And they really say, I want to change my family. I want to put my mother in a better situation. I want to be able to help my sister go to school debt-free. I just don't know what to do.
Yeah.
How do I make the first decision with my college loan and my career, and what do I do? And so I really have a passion for helping young people understand the principles before they get their first job to get exponentially wealthy, but more than that, know why, know their why, who they want to be self-aware, and then say, this is who I want to be when I wake up in the morning. And then we say, okay, let's reverse engineer that to what you need to start doing tomorrow morning.
Yeah. I always wonder, I've seen some clips of you teaching, and it just makes you wonder, like, why weren't they talking to us about that stuff in school? Like, why? I don't understand, for something to be so significant, for all the decisions we have to make with money and credit. I mean, I heard somebody liken our social security number to our first credit card, if you will. And for that to be so significant, like, nobody's talking about it, at least in our communities. Why do you think that is? And why haven't we asked those questions? Like, why haven't we zeroed in on it, you know?
I actually plan on homeschooling my kids in high school. I think I'm going to take them out in 8th grade because there's a lot of things that are missing that I only now know in hindsight.
Yeah.
I don't know why it's not in school. They're starting to implement it more. I'm getting to have these conversations and hopefully get into schools, but a lot of times I'm having these conversations with principals and they're saying, oh my gosh, we need this. We have no financial literacy program. I don't know why it's not taught. Part of it, I believe, is because the agenda of the country we live in is to create a certain class, a middle or lower class, and you can't see. And the other thing is, a lot of these principles need to be taught at home. It's not really an educational thing. You can learn them at school, but the people who are growing up with wealth had these conversations at their dinner tables growing up. They're getting to hear mom say, okay, this is what we're doing with our stocks today. They're saying, hey, while we watch Disney Plus, let's also own a little bit of Disney, the company. I just had this conversation with my daughter, Marley. What is the stock? I said, oh, this phone daddy's using, I also own a piece of the company. So when we buy one, I get paid, in theory. And even that little bit, saying, oh, everything around here, we own a little piece of. That Sony PlayStation, I own some of Sony. What does that mean, Dad? But those conversations need to be had early at home.
No, I love that. I want to go back to something you mentioned, and I think this was an off-camera conversation we're having, but I was giving you my perception of learning about you being a professional photographer and me feeling some certain kind of way that you didn't go into detail, after we met. And you were talking about, even though you had taken this path of wanting to pursue photography in that way, you really didn't have the confidence in your work. So I saw a super professional, great photographer, photographs and skill, but you were like, no, I didn't see it that way. How did you transform your thinking from being just okay, I guess I take good pictures, to gaining the confidence to pursue it even the more, and now working with a really great businesswoman who has an amazing product? I'll let you go into that, but what was that transformation like for you?
I had to fake it for a while.
Okay.
And I had to realize that the social anxiety that I kind of suffer, and the imposter syndrome, I always kind of feel like I'm not that good, I don't belong, I'm about to get fired any moment. I know that a lot of that comes from childhood, and I had to realize that while I feel that way, that's also not true. So I kind of am always having these conversations with myself that I'm like living in a dream, that I feel like I'm not good enough, but also that's not true. That's a weird thing to think. But my natural go-to move is I don't want to be celebrated. I don't really belong here. When are they going to figure this out that I should not be in this room? I kind of, maybe they saw one good picture and think I'm great, and I'm not really ready for this. And I always struggle with that. And I also always want to be humble, maybe to my own detriment. So that's part of it. But I realized for a while I just had to fake it because I started to understand the psychology of people.
Yeah.
People believe what you tell them.
That's true.
It's how Donald Trump became president.
Yeah.
He's not good at politics, but when you if you look at all of the infamous people in history, I said, and I watch a lot of documentaries. It's interesting to me, the psychology of people. If you look at anybody who's big, they've either done something really amazingly successful or their personality was so grandiose and they believed in themselves. And I told you I'm the best enough times that you start to believe it.
Yeah.
If you see Best Pancake House, you might say, I might need to check that out, even if they just wrote it that morning.
Yeah.
And so I said, I need to take that and slap it on top of who I believe I am internally and start claiming it, but also stay humble.
Yeah.
And so it's still a walk, but I got a call one day from Dr. Lisa Williams and said, Chida recommended 2 people, and I saw your stuff and you are who I want to work with. I didn't know much.
Yeah.
She said, I own the largest Black-owned doll company in the world and women-owned. We have projects coming out with Disney where we're doing the Proud Family line of products and toys, as well as the new Wakanda Forever Black Panther 2, which there was not even a trailer for this. I heard this almost a year before.
Yeah.
And we need a photographer. I need someone to photograph our products, to do lifestyle things, as well as be my own personal photographer. And I said, absolutely. And we just discussed it, and it's been an amazing, beautiful ride.
Yeah.
I've gotten in rooms to experience things that I never would have even thought I could. And recently we won a TOTY, T-O-T-Y, Toy of the Year, which is equivalent to Oscars or Emmys in the toy world, which was the Toy of the Year. We won it for Wakanda Forever, our products. And I got to photograph those. If you go on Marvel.com right now, those photos are mine.
That's amazing.
And I'm proud of that.
Yeah.
And we have some really nice things coming out.
Yeah.
So
it's funny you're talking about, the imposter syndrome, because I didn't realize how many people suffered from that. And I know firsthand, probably when we met, I was dealing with that because my first day running the newspaper, I had to Google my job description. And I was like, oh my God, what am I doing here? I'm running a whole newspaper. Like, even though I grew up in the paper, there was still a lot of stuff I didn't know because I didn't really care to spend that type of time at the business. I despise family business because I felt like it robbed me of family time. So I just didn't even care to do it. But that imposter syndrome is a real thing. And it's that moment once you really start believing that you could do something and changing how you talk to yourself, that things really you can kind of get a little bit more comfortable with doing the work that you do. But I'm glad to hear you mention that because I don't think a lot of people understand how many people actually deal with it. They see your moment of arrival and that you've made it and you've done all these great things with photographs, but not even knowing there's still conversations you have to have with yourself to get you to keep going the next day and saying, hey, I'm good. How do you maintain that level of success in terms of the work that you're doing? Is there a particular way, like you're studying your craft, or do you ever just sit back and be like, I got this, I'm good,
Good question, and it plays into the question you asked me earlier about confidence. This is also where I got my confidence from. I only had to fake it for a little bit.
Yeah.
Confidence also comes from repeatedly setting a goal and accomplishing it. You do that enough times, you start to create a layer that now I feel completely different than I did 10 years ago.
Okay.
I can walk into a room and kind of feel like, nobody tell me nothing.
Yeah.
It's just how I feel. I may never say it. It's just how I feel.
Yeah.
But it's because I know what I've been through.
Yeah.
I know what I've accomplished, and I don't really, CEO income does not matter to me. I feel like I belong everywhere and maybe even more so. But I feel it.
Yeah.
But it's only because I know what I've done.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll probably never say it. I may not make a video about it, but that internal, that's where it comes from. The success piece, I'm an avid learner. I never stop. If there's something that I don't know, I say, I'll know it by the weekend.
Yeah.
anything. Somebody say, hey, we need you to learn to do this. Just give me YouTube, give me a computer, and give me about 24 hours. I'll at least have a working knowledge. I'm confident in myself in that because everything I've done with this toy company, I've never done before.
Yeah.
She hired me because I can shoot brown people well. And now I'm having to figure out, how do you bring a doll to life?
Yeah.
How do you make eyes look like this? How do you create the background that's white? Recently, I had to shoot a photograph of an award that was completely glass. I was like, how do you do that? It's completely see-through. Little things.
Yeah.
So I had to go learn it. I said, how do you light something that's completely see-through? And these little things, I'm a consummate learner. I have, masterclass, I YouTube, I listen to podcasts all day, documentaries, and I listen to audiobooks, and I'm just an obsessive learner.
Yeah.
That's it.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And I'm glad you went into that detail. Sometimes you often wonder, at least I wonder, like, how do people that are able to accomplish their goals spend their time during the day? Because you need to sleep, you need to rest. And I'd say for me personally, like now that I have a government job, a 9 to 5, that like entrepreneurial beast is still like pulling at me. So now it's like, okay, you do your job, which can spill over into the evening. How do you divide your time? So maybe it's saying no to hanging out. Maybe it's not going to the restaurant. You got to save money to invest it in this business idea or something like that. So there comes some moments where you have to make really critical choices about how you spend your time. And I think the big thing that could be a little nerve-wracking is looking back over your days and weeks and recognizing that maybe you wasted some time that you can't get back. Have you ever had those regrets with your time, or do you just try to make sure you never find yourself in a space where you've regretted how you spent time the day before?
No, I am the opposite because as hard as this, as gung-ho as it sounds like I am, my motivation is not to work. My motivation is not to be a photographer. It's not any of that. It's really only to own as much of my time as possible and to wake up and make choices on the spot. Seriously.
Yeah.
And I like the things I do that enabled me to do that, very much so.
So
But
you're a bit conflicted.
I romanticize life. I wake up, I go feed the ducks, I go for walks around. But this is what I have a list, a happiness list.
Okay.
And this is what has also always motivated me. I've worked on this for years. It's in my phone. It's very long. And I just add things that I say, this is what I would like to do. This is what I would hope to do. This was before I quit my job. I said, one day I'd like to wake up without an alarm clock.
Yeah.
I'd like to meditate. I'd like to spend time with my kids and take them to school. I like to go on walks. And then maybe at some point I'll get to work and do really amazing, beautiful work. Then I like to spend time with my family. And then I said, if I say, hey, I'm craving French toast, I want to say, let's go to France tomorrow. Oh, my daughter's learning about Egypt. Let's go see the pyramids this weekend.
Yeah.
Don't give me 2 years to say, let's just go and make decisions like that. That is what inspires. It makes me excited now thinking about it. To give myself and my family experiences is why I work.
Yeah.
So I'm not conflicted. I worked those hours. I did what no one else could, so later I could do what no one else can. I did not say I want to work 80 to 100 hours in perpetuity. I said I need to plant a seed.
Yeah.
I invested. I'm doing some really interesting things with my finances. We're good right now, honestly. We could take our foot off the gas if we really wanted to. But I have this hustle mentality that I do not want my kids to ever have to go ask another person for a job. Yeah. That I have something for them, that they can at 18 say, oh, this is the property I want. This is the business I want to start. Dad, can you help me? Absolutely. I can talk you through it, walk you through it, and then also give you the resources and the seed money so you don't have to go borrow somebody's money and go into debt. We can do this together. Yeah. These are dreams I have. Freedom, choice.
Yeah. So even thinking back to how life was before, you have a very different life you're living now than the one you experienced growing up. And essentially you're breaking like generational curses and just saying we're going to have a different life. What are some of the biggest differences that you've seen from the life you've created for your family today to how you grew up?
Peace. I told you this, but the pinnacle of my choices, because I always have to ask myself, okay, what is my enough? Yeah. Because if my goal is to make $1 million, once I hit $1 million, it will be way too small. Yeah. I will need 5. And then I'll need 10. And I understand the hedonic treadmill, as it's called, right? You'll never get off of this. So I had to say, okay, what are the parameters of my happy life? Yeah. Always continue growing, but also define my own version of happiness. And I said, well, what is the greatest ROI on our money? What is the greatest return on investment for me spending time working at all? I don't just want money. Money is intrinsically worthless. Yeah. If somebody gives you $1 million and said it's all yours, look at it, have fun with it, play it. You just can never spend it. Well, it wouldn't serve you any good because it doesn't have any intrinsic value. So then what do we work for? What do we trade our time for?
Yeah.
When I realized what that is for me, I said, well, it's happiness, which is different for everybody. It's my version of happiness, in which I have a list. It's peace and it's freedom. And what's different about my life now is there's peace. I lived in a lot of different homes. I was bouncing from a grandmother and then my mom, who was my best friend, but I saw her through a lot of drug addiction. I saw the cops break in through our front door at my grandmother's house where we were living, push me out the side, go get my mom and put her in a police car.
Wow.
Then I didn't see her for 2 years.
Yeah.
And I still don't even really know what happened then.
Yeah.
I just know a few years later, I was at her rehab graduation. So then I was living with another grandma. And then my father came back when I was about a teenager. He was living in Atlanta. So I've never had what I have. And I think that's what inspired me to be so intentional about creating this life, is because I wanted this.
Yeah.
I get to now live my childhood.
Yeah. I love that. I love that. So how does it feel when you look at your children and your wife and you spend time with your family and you see that you've been able to create and manifest this thing that you only dreamed about?
It's a different type of joy.
Yeah.
And it's also one that I'm very cognizant about, because a lot of times we will not realize when we're in the moment that we once prayed to be in, because it's happening.
Yeah.
We'll forget, oh my God, I wanted to be here.
Yeah.
I remember I wanted to have a zero net worth at some point. I was almost $90,000 in personal debt. I said, I just want to owe nobody. I don't even care about being wealthy.
Yeah.
Just want to. Now I'm past that, and you have to stop and say, I'm here constantly.
Yeah.
I'll sit on the couch and just watch them playing, and I'll write it down in my little journal to create a mental screenshot or a mental image of this moment. And at the same time, I realize I'm raising kids who don't have to deal with the struggles that I have. And I feel two ways about it, because it's those struggles that made me this on fire about everything, about wanting to change my life, about wanting to get after it. When you're sleeping in your car on Santa Monica and Vine and it's freezing, you got to turn the heater on every 2 hours to warm. These are things that stick.
Yeah.
I was so broke, I'm sorry, I'm jumping, I'll go back to it, that I would be borrowing money from people. Hey, can I get $1? Friends, people. So I go get 2 apple pies from McDonald's or a little 79-cent from Taco Bell. And this is how I lived for a year. Or coins, real embarrassing type of stuff. And I remember when the repo people said, we're going to come repo your car, but we'll give you a day to clear it out. So I drove around LA saying, okay, well, where am I going to sleep when they take this? I was just rocking in there for a few nights. And so all these things my kids will never experience.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I wonder who they'll be because of it. So I'm really diligent that while I said, look, you guys don't have to worry about that. Remember the importance of being humble.
Yeah.
And I still make them work.
Yeah.
Yeah. Life ain't going to be easy.
Yeah. So as much as we try to get out of those hard moments, you start to learn how necessary they are. And it's amazing when you are doing better, what you remember, like how vivid the memory of that hard moment was. You know, it's kind of surreal. And I feel like it's God's way of saying, when you get to where you need to be, don't ever forget how you felt in this moment, because you're going to have to reach back. You're going to have to talk about it. Your story is going to help somebody. So I just thank you for being even transparent in that. I'm always inspired when I hear your story. I'm just like, oh my God, Brandon's awesome. This is great. But what would you say to that person that's kind of having a moment, scared to pivot, scared to actually act on that thought that they're constantly thinking about? Because you had a few thoughts you were always thinking about, and finally you were like, look, I have to act on this. What would you say to that person that's listening or watching and they don't, they're kind of hesitating?
Everything actually is possible, but it's not. You cannot hope your way into it, and you can't pray your way into it, and you can't sit around and wait. Everything is possible, but it's going to take very specific choices.
Yeah.
It has to take metaphorically, you've got to put in the 80 to 100 hours a week for whatever that is for you. You've got to say, I'm going to not eat out, whatever that means for you.
Yeah.
It's a sacrificial thing. If you're really that stuck,
Yeah.
you have to create cushion in your life, whatever that is. And you can't wait it out and, okay, if I just get that one more job or a little bit more money, because whatever got you into that situation is a mentality thing. And a little bit more money won't fix it. Because now I argue I can probably do more with 50 grand a year than somebody who makes 150 grand a year, because my mind is different. Easy. 100% confident about that. And then you need to say, who am I when I'm not on Instagram, when TikTok is off, when I'm not comparing myself to the Kardashians or the housewives or my friends or that travel or that relationship that, oh, I just really want that. That's couples goals. Who am I? Get a cup of tea, Go sit outside, talk to God, meditate, talk to somebody you love. And then say, when I turn it off, what does my life look like? Really design it.
Yeah.
It can't be esoteric. I'd like to have a house one day. No, where do you want to live? How much is it going to cost? When do you want to be there by? And then how much do you need to have as the down payment?
Yeah.
Okay, 20%. Then if I need 20% and I want to be there in 4 years, I need to save how much every month. Oh, do I make that? Am I able to do that? No, then something needs to change. I either need to make more or spend less. It's very black and white when you do this with any dream.
Yeah.
So that's what I say. Dream it, but then actually make a blueprint.
Yeah.
If I say I want to get somewhere, I can just figure it out, or I can put the actual destination in my GPS, and it'll give me step-by-step directions. So then I'll know when I leave my driveway, I got to go left.
Yeah.
But if you don't have that destination, it's very difficult to just walk.
Yeah, I like that. You said something that I wanted to kind of get you to elaborate on. It wasn't a direct comment, but I think about those moments when you realize you can actually make money off of doing something that you didn't realize you can make money off of doing. And you see somebody else getting a cool like 5 or 10 and you're like, wait a minute. First of all, my presentation is way better. I could do that. What things did you look at in your life that you recognized you could make money off of that would be pretty complicated for someone else, but maybe a little more easier for you because you had the talent and the wherewithal? How did you discover that you could take photography, the distance that you've taken it, the financial literacy? Yeah, you were learning all this stuff for you to get yourself out the hole, but when did you decide that you could actually make money teaching this?
Accidentally. I realized, and I tell people this now, I said, whatever your job is paying you, they're paying you about 1/3 to 1/4 of what you're actually worth in value to the company. So if you're making $25 an hour, you're probably worth $100 an hour. But there has to be a middleman. They have to make a profit on you. That's okay. You work for somebody. They need to make something off of you. But I realized that. And I said, if I cut them out and figure out how to just connect directly with the customer, whoever that customer is, you just get the whole pie. And it was slowly that I started to say, let me just up my price by $25 an hour and see what happens. Yeah, fine. Here it is. They send the check. I said, And I just started doing that. And I realized when I get pushback. And I also said, well, there are certain things I actually don't want to do that pay certain things. And so I realized the type of client that I wanted to deal with. But it really is your reps, right? I say this with reps. You need to have repetition. Same thing with coaching. I used to do coaching sessions with friends and people for free. May I sit down with you and your girlfriend? You say, my money situation, I need to practice. I said, I need to practice hearing the questions. I need to practice understanding them. And you'll get all my knowledge for free if you give me an hour of your time. And I did that for a while. Then I would just ask people, can we hop on Zoom? Let me give you a coaching session for free. As a photographer, I would just photograph everybody for free. Headshots, I got you. I need to learn how to get better at this. This is my idea in all things. But then when I realized, I remember the first time I said, I charge $100 an hour. I was making $23 an hour at my job. And when they said that, they said, that's no problem. And I was just I'm going to just say something really high, which I thought was high. I realized everybody's doing that now, but it was just being bold enough to say it. And now, sometimes people balk at my prices even a little bit more than that, and that's okay because you do realize, once you realize your level, I'm Louis Vuitton, they don't have to lower the price. This is the cost, right? This is the price. And when we're talking about the confidence piece, I tell you what I'm worth. You don't tell me, and it's okay if we don't agree. I am what I am, and I know the value I'm going to bring, and understanding that I am an investment also. As a photographer, as an author, you're getting value out of me being there. If I'm teaching you something, if I'm having an educational experience, the value you're going to get, and I'm confident that the value you're going to get is above what you'll pay me. So you need to feel confident in that before you start going crazy with your prices. But once you do, treat yourself like a business.
Yeah. I love it. Is there anything you want to add for our listeners?
I could go on. No.
I know. Okay. I love talking to you. We always have these great conversations. I'm like, listen, we need to get this on a podcast because this brother got some stories to tell.
No, just if anybody out there really is struggling or feeling that peace, the number one skill, aside from being able to reverse engineer big goals, big ideas into small pieces, is intimately, deeply knowing who you are. Self-awareness. As poetic as it sounds, it really helps you in discernment, because then your girlfriend who you just met who's saying she likes this, you're not getting fall into that trap where this man says he liked this song. I guess I'm doing this because he says this. This is who I am. This is what I'm worth. and I'm really, really good. And I'm lucky to be here, and I'm blessed to be here, but also you're blessed to have me.
Yeah.
And knowing that, and it's not a cocky statement.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it. Thank you, Brandon.
Yes.
You're awesome.
Glad to be here.
So, Brandon, let people know where they can find you.
Brandon S. Johnson Photo. Anywhere, BrandonSJohnsonPhoto.com. That's also my handle for photography things and financially BSJ Coaching.
Cool. Thank you.
Of course.
Folks, thanks for joining us. This is That Moment. I am your host, Chida Rebecca. You can find me on Instagram, LinkedIn, and Facebook at Chida Rebecca. The podcast is That Moment on any podcast app. Thanks.